Well, don't look shocked, 'cause what you see is what you get. And as you can see, I'm wearing one of my house coats that I got at Goodwill for $1.99 each. I kind of like this one. Got the right length sleeves, zips up the front easy, lightweight, great for summer. $1.99, girls. So, let's see what I want to start off with. My sister called me last night, and she was talking about one of my videos that I'd just recently done, and she was telling me how good my complexion looked now, how pretty my complexion was. Now, I'm going to tell you this. When you get a compliment from your sister, you've done the best. You've done the best. You grew up with 7 girls, and one would pay you a compliment, you were on top of it. They just didn't do that back then. We didn't do it. It just wasn't normal to tell your sister how pretty she looked, even though you thought it, you didn't say it. So she called and told me how pretty my complexion is. And then she said, your lipstick's too light. You need more color. I said, yeah, but if I go into the reds, you know what happens when you wear a red lipstick? It bleeds. It bleeds when you get our age. But I'll see what I can do. So I went in the bathroom and I pulled out 2 or 3 tubes of lipstick. One of them was almost peach. No, that wouldn't do. Another one was pinky pink. No, that wouldn't do. But that's what I've been wearing all along. If it doesn't show up, no point in trying that. So I opened up one tube and red. It was Jane Russell red. You know who Jane Russell was. Yeah, she was a sexy movie star. Bright red lipstick. So I put that on. I said, oh boy, it's going to bleed right into my mouth. So I grabbed this other tube that was kind of shimmery, shiny. Didn't have much color to it. I rubbed that over this red lipstick. Now, I think I can make that work. Maybe I'll. Now you can tell me whether or not my lips are showing up now. Now, here I am in my house coat, fancying up my lipstick, trying to make my face look pretty, even put on earrings to match a house coat. Who does that? Well, somebody sitting at home got nothing else to do. That's who does that. And my glasses, I looked, all those glasses I've got, and I didn't have any that were light blue. Well, I did have, but I couldn't find them. I laid them down somewhere. So I said, okay, let's try the green ones, my new green ones. I haven't worn those yet. Take a look. I like them. Now that's just about as flashy as you can get. You have to admit, I did a good job when I picked out these glasses. Now I've got to find me something to wear that really makes them show up. So I'm fixed and ready for another little video. And what did I want to talk about? Well, Jan, she sent me a message and she says, why don't you talk about old movies? Well, if there's anybody here that can talk about old movies, it's me. And I remember most of them. I'm getting to where, though, when they come on like Turner Classic Movies, sometimes I think, oh, what's his name? I don't want to forget all those old movie stars. But most of the time The movie comes on. I said, oh, that's Orson Welles. That's Joseph Cotton. That's Jennifer Jones. Alan Ladd. Oh, I can go way back. So, what I'm going to talk about now is radio and movies. Let's start with the radio first. We lived in a big neighborhood. It was sort of country-like. We've got the hills and the gardens, and man on one street got a couple of cows, and our neighbor up above us has got a pig pen up at the top of the hill. So that's the kind of neighborhood it was. And we were the only family in that neighborhood that had a radio. Can you imagine that? The only ones with a radio. It was a little tabletop radio called a Fada, F-A-D-A. You can go on the internet and you can find pictures of them. So on Saturday night was the night for listening to the radio. And the neighbors came. They all came to our house. And we sat around listening to Fibber McGee and Molly. Now, if you're my age, you know who Fibber McGee and Molly was. You know who the Great Gildersleeve was. You know who Broderick Crawford was in Highway Patrol. Oh, you had the Inner Sanctum. Gosh, the kids loved Inner Sanctum. And we had, later on, now we got a Magnavox radio. It was one of those big floor models. And we'd gather around the radio and sit on the floor and listen to Inner Sanctum. You know, the screeching door. You'd hear that door screech open. And you started looking over your shoulder because it was real. You just knew somebody was going to put their hand on your shoulder and you're going straight through the ceiling. But we kids loved Inner Sanctum. And our Magnavox radio was one of those big floor models and had push buttons. You know, you didn't have to turn knobs. Didn't have to hunt the radio station you wanted. You just put the button and you had WNOX, Knoxville, Tennessee. You push another button, you had WCTT, Corbin. And you had another button and it was, don't let me forget the one for Nashville. Because on Saturday night, we had to listen to the Grand Ole Opry. That was back during the Roy Acuff and Jimmy Dickens days. And it wasn't in favor with us kids, but Mom and Daddy watched the Grand Ole Opry. And listened, of course, we listened to it for years before the TV came on. Now, let's move on up into, I wanted to tell you about the little 15-minute shows. They had 15-minute radio shows. And one of them was called Beulah. Beulah was a maid. You could almost picture her, heavy set, kind of like Aunt Jemima. And her neighbor's name was Oreo. Now, my sister and my brother and I would come home for lunch from school, and we'd sit at the kitchen table, and for 15 minutes, we listened to Beulah. Everybody listened to Beulah. She was so funny. And Oreo, it opened up the show with, you heard Oreo yell, Beulah! That was the beginning of the show. Amazing how exciting little things like that were back in those days. Loved those shows, could sit and listen to them again. Now, we're getting into the movies. And the one I'm going to focus on was one produced in 1949. 1949, I was 13 years old. I was old enough to go to the movie every Saturday afternoon and see a first-run movie, plus in Technicolor. And I would see a Western. You got two movies, and you could go at 1 o'clock and stay till 9 o'clock that night if you wanted to see them over and over and over. Not like it is today. You go in, you go at the beginning of the movie. Sometimes we'd go to the theater and we'd get there right in the middle of the movie. So we'd watch the rest of the movie, watch the Western, and then we'd come back to the movie again and watch it all the way through. That's what you did when you were teenagers. There was one movie called The Third Man. How many of you recognize that? It's always been a mystery to me. I have seen it and seen it and seen it, and I still don't understand what it was about. Somebody was supposed to have died. Don't remember how they were killed, but you would see people in shadows. Now, this movie was Orson Welles, Joseph Cotten, and I've seen it time and time again on like Turner Classic Movies. Now, I'm going to play a little something and see if you recognize this. That's all I'm going to play, because you can tell that's a tinny sounding music. But that was the theme song, the Third Man theme for the movie The Third Man. It was so popular that it was a British made theme song, and they considered it the number one movie theme song for the 20th century. Number one. I can tell you a little more about that. My older sister had a record player, one of those little record players, you know, put the needle over on the record, and it played 78 RPM records. She had the record of the Third Man theme. Now, those records were, about this big round. And they had the hole in the middle about the size of a pencil that went down on your record player for you to play it. She had played that record so many times that had worn the hole in that record so much that when it went around and around, it went because the hole had been worn out. That's how popular the Third Man theme was. And I can remember she gave me that record when I got a new stereo. And I played it. And I loved the theme song just as she did. Now, I've told you about the time I saw all of the movie stars in Louisville. But some of you may not have seen that video. And I was just 20 years old. downtown Louisville in Stewart Department Store, and I've got the video about that, but I'll kind of remind you how it was with my sister-in-law, and people were everywhere. Why are there so many people in town today? We worked our way out of the store, and the sidewalk was lined with people. What's going on? We wormed our way through those people to the edge of the sidewalk. And the first thing I saw was this gorgeous, big, long Cadillac with those tail fins that looked like it was just going to sweep right up into the air in a minute. And sitting on the back of that open convertible was Lee Marvin. I knew who he was. I knew all those movie stars. I could not believe my eyes. What in the world is going on? They were all Cadillacs, all convertibles, all gorgeous. Along comes one who's sitting on that back seat, waving, just about to take my breath away. Jane Powell. Now, if you're my age, you know who Jane Powell was. She played with Fred Astaire in those musicals, and she had a beautiful voice and prettiest little thing you ever saw. But I didn't know until that day, as gorgeous as she was, she had freckles all over her face. Boy, that was a shock to me. I didn't know Jane Powell had freckles. So, you know how well they cover up those faces, what good makeup artists they have in the movies. No blemishes on the faces at all. Now I'm going to tell you, because you don't see any blemishes on my face, I haven't had a makeup artist touch it up. But that day, Jane Powell's freckles showed. We come on down, and Ann Miller, and what was her name? Not Anne Francis, but something Saint Marie St. John, something like that. Anyway, she was one. And then along comes Van Johnson. I didn't know his face was covered with freckles either, but it was. Another good makeup artist, Rod Taylor. I'm standing there stiff as a board, just going numb, because I could recognize every movie star that came down 4th Avenue. It wasn't 4th Avenue, it was 4th Street. Went all the way through Louisville, that street I took when I worked downtown Louisville. Took the bus about 4 miles every day. So anyway, that was my grand opening to the movie stars. And was it fantastic? 20-year-old girl. Of course, I was a mother then. I just had my baby. It was fascinating. Now, through the years, I have had my favorite movie stars. I can name the majority of them. You put them on the screen, I can tell you who he is, who she is, who that child is. Of course, those that like Elizabeth Taylor and Grace Kelly and Lana Turner, well, everybody knows those. But I can name those that say, how do you know who he is? I went to the movies every Saturday. That's how I know. And one of my favorite movie stars for years was Greer Garson. And just the other night on Turner Classic Movies, there was a string of Greer Garson movies, and I want you to know that at 12:45 a.m. I was watching her, and there was going to be another movie with her coming on right after, so I recorded it. I thought, I can't sit here all night long watching Greer Garson, but I came pretty close to it. Now, a recent new friend of mine learned that Greer Garson was one of my favorite movie stars. And I'm going to show you what he did. He sent me this picture. Oh, I'm getting a glare. I hope you don't get it. Okay. He sent me this autographed picture of Greer Garson. Now, if that won't make you swallow your tongue, I don't know what will. He knew Greer Garson, and he had her autographed photograph and sent it to me. Now, don't you think I'm going to take good care of that? And when I'm gone, my children better take good care of it too, because it's the only autographed picture I have of a movie star. And I thought she was fantastic. So, if you haven't watched any of Greer Garson movies, you should. There's the Random Harvest. Oh, she was wonderful. That was the one. All of her movies were heartwarming, wonderful movies. There was one movie called Scandal at Scurry. What would that be? Well, I'm going to tell you. She starred with Walter Pidgeon in movie after movie. And this movie, there was an orphan train that came through the community. He owned a general store. And the train stopped, and of course all of these children, it was an orphan train going from the east to the west, taking these children to be adopted by families. One little girl came into the store, and Greer Garson, she didn't have children, saw her. And then later, they're sitting by a pond. I'll never forget this. The little girl is eating her sandwich that she brought with her on the train. And she's got a little goldfish bowl. Got a little goldfish in it. And she's going to let the goldfish go. She's going to put it into the pond. I wish I could tell you the name of the goldfish, because you would get a kick out of how she named the fish. Well, anyway, that was one movie, and there was a little upset situation, and that's how the movie got called Scandal at Scurry. Then there was another movie called Blossoms in the Dust. Greer Garson, Walter Pidgeon, and Marsha Hunt. I've got a big, thick book on Marsha Hunt. She was a model in the 1920s. Beautiful. She was in this movie with Greer Garson. They played sisters. Blossoms in the Dust were orphaned children that had no place to live. And Greer Garson became the mother to these children. It was like a daycare, like what we would call a daycare today. And it's based on a true story. If you ever get the chance to see that movie, you watch it, because it was a true story. And there are other movies. I think she was in one, she may have been in one where the earthquake in San Francisco, I'm not sure. She was a star in that one with Clark Gable. I could be wrong. But she's played in a lot of, and Mrs. Miniver. Now that one will just stab you right in the heart. So I'm just telling you a few of the old movies I've seen, which means I was seeing movies from the time I was 13 years old until I married. Every Saturday afternoon, and sometimes if Daddy would give me a dime on Sunday, I'd go to the Sunday afternoon movies. They were the first run movies on Sunday. But mark my word, if I didn't go to Sunday school and church that day, there was no dime and there was no movie. So if I wanted to see the movie on Sunday, I had to go to Sunday school. But that was okay. We went every Sunday anyway. I'm trying to think if there were any other. Oh, I told you about seeing Robert. His name won't come to me, but you know who he is. He died young. I'm standing in a little antique shop in Midway, Kentucky. Nobody's in there except the lady clerk, me, and this young man. Whew, gosh, he was good looking. His hair kind of fell down on his forehead. He was wearing a navy blue windbreaker jacket, hands in his pocket, just mosey around looking. I'm going to kick myself because I can't remember his last name. But you would know who he is. Now, as soon as I finish, he'll come to me. I'll tell you in the next video who it was. But I didn't have the nerve to ask for his autograph. Yep, just couldn't do it. So that's as close as I got to movie stars. But oh, how I would love to have met a few of them. I would love to have met Cary Grant. I want to tell you a story about Cary Grant. When I was in England, we were on a land tour. And one of the couples on the coach with us, we were going to Scotland and Wales and all around. They were from California. She was tall, gorgeous, had blonde hair. She would look good in anything she put on. And so friendly. Got to know her. Her husband was kind of one of these just off to himself, enjoying himself. And she stuck with my sister and me. And I learned she lived in California. And she had been an international model. Goodness gracious alive. You could tell by looking at her. Yeah, she probably was. And she's sending postcards to her friend back home. She's got one for the Manellis. You know who the Manellis are. Yeah. And she named this other one. And then she says, oh, I forgot to get a card for Rosemary and Bob Stack. Well, this little small town country girl looks at her and says, you know Robert Stack? She laughed and she said, they're our best friends. I could not believe it. Just could not believe it. She knew Robert Stack. So I started questioning her. I said, well, did you ever meet James Garner? He was big on TV, Maverick. that sort of thing. Oh, she said, well, as a matter of fact, it did. Said, we were on a hayride once, these big wagons with the stacks of straw hay on the back of the wagon. And she said, he was on one haystack, I was on another, facing each other. And we hit this big bump, and it threw me right over into James Garner's lap. You were on a hayride with James Garner. Yes. What did he say? He said, he just grinned real big, but his wife didn't like it very much. So I'm sitting there, this country girl from Tennessee, questioning this international model. Who else do you know? She said, I met Cary Grant. Well, goodness, I was about ready to fall off my chair when she said that. Cary Grant. He was came in a restaurant, and he pulled out this, what looked like a wallet, but was a folder of photographs. And he was showing everybody his little girl picture. And I said, I can't imagine being in a restaurant with Cary Grant. She said he was so friendly. So, my association with these famous people is secondhand, but that was good enough for me, because I knew I was never going to see any of them. But she was such a delightful person. And to this day, she and her husband, he died just recently, she and her husband were the top entertainers in Washington, D.C. They entertained people like the president of Brazil. Top name people. They were always there doing the entertaining, and everyone in Washington, D.C. knew my friend Helga. That was her name. That was probably one of the most exciting things for me on my trip to England, was the association with this lady, beautiful lady, common as dirt, or I should say a bologna sandwich. But she was so much fun. She was so delightful. So, I could go on and on with the movies. Of course, I saw Gone with the Wind at the movie theater. Now, that was the beginning of R-rated movies. And you'll all remember at the end of Gone with the Wind when he says, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. That shocked us all. Shocked us all. I was a teenager. He said that in a movie. The other movie you might have considered this is what R-rated was back in those days. You know what it is today. Did you ever see the movie Duel in the Sun? Gregory Peck, oh, so handsome. Joseph Cotton, equally as handsome. And Jennifer Jones. If you ever get to chance to see that movie, you should, because there's a love scene in it. Gosh, they're showing this in a movie? Now, they had their clothes on. They were fully clothed. But that was the beginning of my learning about sex relations between men and women. Pretty good, yeah. But you be sure and look that one up. Duel in the Sun. One of on my list. It'd be on my list of top-rated movies. So, for the time being, I think I've told you enough about my experience with movie stars, except I left one out. Don't tell me I'm not going to say his name. Burt Lancaster. Burt Lancaster played in a movie called The Kentuckian. It had another name at the beginning and they changed it. I was graduating from high school. It was, we were celebrating and we were going to Cumberland Falls. That's where Burt Lancaster was. It was the beginning of the movie, The Kentuckian. I have a VCR now of that movie. And Burt Lancaster is walking across the river above the falls. Now that's a big waterfall. And there was a ferry there too. But the water was low that day. And you see a distant view of him and a little boy who was his son. They're skipping across that river on huge rocks. The water was so low. And that's the only part of my hometown that got in that movie. But when I ran across the VCR one day, I said, yes, I need to pick up this because it shows Burt Lancaster filming in my hometown. Didn't get to meet him. We tried, but they'd already moved on to another location by the time we teenage girls were able to locate where he was. And you know what a car full of teenage girls can be like when they're looking for a male movie star. Yes, it was fun. It was fun. But we were so disappointed. So that's going to finish my video today. It has nothing to do with anything. It's just something from the past that I'm going back as far as age 13 when I went to the movies every Saturday afternoon, the Hippodrome Theater. That was a landmark if there ever was one. And that was the recreation for a small town, was going to the movies. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and please, I'm sure many of you have met famous people, famous stars, and I don't mind if you tell me about them, because I think it's kind of exciting. That's a world that we dreamed about, never really got to be a part of, but these movie stars were in our dreams. Now, take a look at my pretty glasses. Now, they don't match, but I didn't care, because I think I look good in these glasses. Don't you? Please tell me you do. Oh my, dress up in a house coat and rhinestone glasses. Whatever works, works. And thank you for sticking with me. Good night.